If you enjoy what we do on these podcasts, please go to mwpnews.com. There you can see articles about some of the movies we've seen, some things that we don't talk about on podcasts, and links to ways you can support the show. Thank you. Good morning. I may have done that too soon. And welcome to Beware of Spoilers. I am Adam. We're on the 4th episode of Dune Prophecy now. 4 of 6. And this episode is probably the most mixed I've felt of any of them. Because I feel like there's some good and there's some bad. And then let's really just get into that. So, I think the good that really works in this episode is I enjoy seeing the Bene Gesserit do what we've been told the Bene Gesserit does. And that's the thing that, we see it in Dune and Dune Part 2. This idea that the Bene Gesserit are very good at influencing from the shadows. They use their roles as truthsayers to influence, politicians and all of that, and they do a good job of that. But the fundamental issue that we kind of get from this show, or from the movies, that it's kind of we're told the Bene Gesserit do that. We're told the Bene Gesserit have laid this trail for Paul to walk on Arrakis. We're told that the Bene Gesserit are trying to intermingle bloodlines in such a way. We don't really see it in action. And in this episode, we really see it in action as the Bene Gesserit are working to get, to show that they have power, is what their objective is to show Emperor Carino they have power. So they're manipulating things to get the Harkonnens on the High Council. Not the High Council, that's from John Wick, from the great, on the Council of the Great Houses. I think it is the High Council of the Great Houses. And then once they do that, they go and the plan is okay, so we know the Atreides is going to come out with this thinking machine. He's going to use that to try and kill the Emperor. And then when he does that, we will be able to step in, stop it, and we'll look like heroes. It's all right, great, awesome. Cool plan. No room for error on this. And then what's it called? And then the other guy kind of does it. Now, this is kind of where I get into the bad and why I have this issue. We get introduced to a few concepts in this episode that I think kind of show the hand for where the show is going to go for the rest of the way. And to that end, I'm a little annoyed. And we'll get into that in a minute. So, she picks up we have that scene where Not Duncan is there, and I'm going to call him Not Duncan for a good reason. We'll get to it in a little bit. And spoilers for not only this episode, but we're going to do some light spoiling of some of Dune down the road, not just Dune and Messiah, but even further down the line, and some other things that come before Dune, but is exposited in these later books. So spoilers, if you don't want to hear that, then I would say cut out now, read the books. If not, this is mostly going to be speculating, so I could be wrong. So he does his firebending in the Landstrad, and then he, it turns out he bleeds, so she grabs his blood, and then it's we're going to find out who he is now because we can use the genetic, all the genetic information we have to figure out who this guy is and where he came from and what he wants. It's all right, cool, that's all great. And I think the reveal of this, the ending big reveal of this whole thing, is going to be he is a Gola. For those who don't know, I believe, if I remember, it was either the Ixians have the ability to, the Tleilaxu have the, I think they're one and the same, I don't remember, but the Tleilaxu have the ability to create these clones, in these things they call them axolotl tanks, and these clones can be reprogrammed, and, you know, they come and they can replace the person. They get the ability later on down the line to have them implanted with memories, but this is early, so they don't have, like, I think the first one, and spoilers again, the first one who is given and has the ability to retain the memories of their past life is Duncan. When they resurrect Jason Momoa through this and give it to, and look, let me just put this in an easier parlance. If you want to get a good sense of what I'm talking about here, go watch the first episode of The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. One of the segments in that is a parody of God Emperor of Dune. And Billy is Duncan. So if Billy is Duncan, he keeps dying, and each time he dies, he comes back with a clone, and the number on his chest gets higher. And it's great because it's like you'll have these little bits where it's like he won't be in a scene, and then he'll come to the next scene, and his number is like 30 higher, and it's like, that's dumb. Like, how did he die so many times between then and now? That's what this is, and that is, you know, that's how that kind of rolls. And there's a lot of Dune references in Billy and Mandy too, by the way. The issue with this comes from between that and the very end of the episode, where we get the first face dancer, the shape-shifting Tleilaxu, who can, you know, it turns out one of the members of the Bene Gesserit was that. Later down the line, they form their own kind of genetic thing that is kind of a counterpart to the Bene Gesserit, the Bene Tleilax, and they are doing similar missions to try to get control of the known universe. The same genetic engineering, the same, you know, control of bloodlines, the same, like, that whole thing is kind of, you know, it's all kind of interesting. And the reason why I don't like this stuff, the way they've introduced it, is that we are, again, 10,000 years in the past, and the issue that I have with this is that there is a really interesting story idea that they kind of allude to here. And if this show was, like, a little bit further down the line, they could have done something interesting where it is the schism that leads to the separation of the Bene Gesserit from the Bene Tleilax. And it being these two groups that kind of start out, and it is about them separating out and becoming that. Because that's something that where this show is in release time would be really useful for audiences. We're introducing the shapeshifters, we're introducing the idea of the Gola, we're introducing the idea of the Bene Tleilax, who are this counterpart who want to do kind of the same thing. Like, all of these things are really interesting ideas that, if you play them against each other, could be really cool. And if you do the origins of, not to sound like Trump, I do that joke so often it's fucking up how I pronounce it. The origins of that, it could be a really cool way of setting this character, you know, setting these two groups in motion in a way that now the audience is familiar with them when we get to Messiah. Because these are big, grand ideas that are going to be in play in Messiah. The idea that you have these shapeshifters that you can't trust because you don't know who they are. The idea that you have the ability to bring people back. And if it is this early version of the Gola, is what this guy is, and that's what he's doing. Like, it puts you in an interesting place because as an early Gola, it could be they were fucking around with giving him other powers. And it could be they were fucking around with that kind of thing. And that would be something that's like, oh shit, now we have an interesting way to go on this. But again, the show is just, it's too far in the past because we know the Bene Tleilax don't get founded until shortly before the Spacing Guild gets their monopoly. Like, and that I mean, shortly before, it's like 1,000 years before, but still, like, it's, I mean, well, when did the Spacing Guild get their monopoly? Because, like, 1,500 years, maybe around the same time. We're dealing with such large time frames. But, like, if that's what this show is going to be, at the end of the day, why was that not where we are to begin with? Why is that not where we are now? Like, if the show is going to be the story of the Spacing Guild, not the Spacing Guild, the Bene Talax getting their ideas from the Bene Gesserit, and separating out and doing their own thing. If that's what this is going to be, why are we not seeing that? Like, that's kind of a big thing to not be seeing. Like, from the entire show, where it's like, from the beginning, we get this introduction that's what these characters are going to be, that's what these people are going to be doing. And that would be kind of a cool idea if that's where it's going. I have not seen anything from this show to indicate that they are leaning towards that. Like, but that could be, it could be kind of a subplot. And I think that's kind of the issue of where this show is set, is that it's like, it's too early for any of the key plot points going into Dune and the main Dune saga. And it's too late to really deal with the ramifications of the Butlerian Jihad. Like, and that's the thing too, is that, like, they're announcing out all of these, they're announcing out all the great houses, and I'm like, why is, like, number one, and this is gonna always be my thing that I'm always kind of annoyed about with this, and maybe it is just the Star Wars fan in me, but, like, why are we not using the houses that are introduced in other media and just, like, do a throwaway line just for the fan service? Like, I'm not saying you gotta sit here and do anything big, but, like, just, like, a mention of, like, House Orthos would be nice. Or a mention of House Asaz, which is the one, I think it's from one of the books, actually. It's not just from, Spice Wars. I think that, if I remember correctly, Leto was supposed to marry someone from House Asaz, and then that falls apart, and he ends up marrying Jessica, or not marrying Jessica, but he ends up, fucking Jessica. And that's kind of like the thing where I'm like, okay, so this all kind of, like, they do mention House Vernius of Ix, and it's like, alright, that's cool. But again, like, that's the other big issue that I have with not just this show, but with Brian Herbert's expansion of the lore, is that at a lot of times it doesn't feel like we're expanding anything. It actually feels like, considering how this is, it feels like a contraction, where it's like we're actively getting smaller, in so much as, like, well, it's the it is the, what's the word for here? It's the oh good, okay, I just looked down and I couldn't see the little red light was on, so I was like, oh fuck, it's not recording. Like, we have all these great houses, like, and we'll never hear about Atreides, Harkonnen, Carino, and a little bit Vernius of Ix. Like, we hear about all these things. We never hear about, the other ones. And it's like, is there a good reason for that? And the answer is, not really. Like, and I think the idea of, like, look, this is the like, there are a few things in play in this episode that could have been interesting ideas for shows, and that's kind of my big issue with it. And again, if we're going to be doing this story where this is the falling out of the Bene Talax from the Bene Gesserit, if that's what this is going to be, you should have done that sooner. Because again, we're 4 episodes in. There are 2 episodes left. This is a 6-episode miniseries. There are 2 episodes remaining until we call it a day on this. And we are just now, at the end of episode 4, getting our first introduction of a face dancer. This should have been something that, like, very early on was being done. That way you get this thing. Because that's the thing, like, this reveal happens. The way the reveal is done, it doesn't reveal anything to the audience, besides the fact that Theodosia is a shapeshifter. That was her name, right? That's Theodosia's her name? I think so, because I remember it was a Hamilton name. And, like, okay, she's a shapeshifter. But, like, if you're not someone who's read the books, that means absolutely nothing to you. Like, oh, that's weird. And that's the thing, too. I have a feeling that this show is going to do a lot to... And I think that that's kind of what we're learning in this grand streaming theatrical hybrid experiment that we're kind of in the middle of, is that the shows, more often than not, will harm the movies. And I think in general, it's like anytime you do multiple forms of media, if one's not good, it harms the other. The reception and the sales totals of the other. That's inherently the problem. If something's good, the lead into the next thing will be equally good. If something is bad, the lead into the next thing will be equally bad. At the end of the day, like, when you watch the credits, you don't see Denis Villeneuve's name anywhere in there, in the opening credits. I mean, granted, I don't know who did the credits on this, but they really, like, when I was taught editing, the idea is that you should be able to read it twice before cutting to the next thing. And clearly that's not the case here. Like, I don't understand what the thought process there was. But, like, you don't see Villeneuve's name anywhere in there. And I don't know if, again, going back to what we talked about with Creature Commandos, if the general movie-going public will be able to separate out that. I don't know if the general movie-going public is going to consider that this is not something that is related to the movies in that way. It is the story in this way, in the same way that, like, it's a weird canon system where it's like Dune and Dune Part 2 are kind of an alternate canon to Dune, because there are key differences in the plot. Like, Paul has another son. Like, it is a much tighter, it's a much more, expanded timeline in Dune in the book. Paul, what's it called? Chaney is not against him in the book. Aaliyah is alive and not just, a fetus in the book. And Aaliyah kills the Baron. It's an interesting place. It's weird because it's like those are divergent, yet a lot of the books and the movies, I think it's like books and the show, are designed to kind of be like in canon to both, because they're all prequels and they don't impact the key differences of the book. Of the movie from the book, I mean. So, at the end of the day, like, the issue that I have with this is, like, people are going to watch this and be like, oh, so we have this fire guy, we have these people who can shapeshift. I don't know if this is going to, this feels like a weird thing to change in this series. I don't know why we're doing that. And it may turn people off. It's the same issue that Warner Brothers is dealing with, on top of the fact that J.K. Rowling is a bit of a shithead. Like, people being turned off to the Harry Potter show for other reasons besides the casting being, like, I think Rachel Weisz, I heard, for Professor McGonagall is a weird choice. And, like, she feels a little young for that. That's really the only casting that I've heard that I'm like, yeah, that's not great. I haven't seen the guy who plays Snape in anything, so I can't say he's going to be good or bad. But regardless, the point is, like, on top of all of that, the issue is like, oh, we're going to tie it into Hogwarts Legacy 2. Okay, great, you're going to tie it into Hogwarts Legacy 2. If the show is bad, that's going to negatively impact sales of the game, even if the game is good, and vice versa. If the game is bad, it's going to negatively impact sales of the show, or impact views of the show. And look at Marvel. The Marvels, like, it wasn't even the show was bad for the Marvels or WandaVision. It was just that, people were like, oh, I don't want to have to watch the show. I understand this. So, I feel like this is kind of a, we're trying to milk the franchise cow for as much as we can, and it's not necessarily in the best interest of the franchise as a whole. But we'll see. We have 2 episodes left. We'll be back with that starting next week. We have Creature Commandos this week. We have other stuff coming. Until then, have a great rest of your week.